In this video, I'm going to try and make an end grain chopping board out of scrap wood. Thanks for clicking play and welcome to my bomb shelter basement workshop. I've got loads of scrap wood and offcuts left over from the workshop rebuild in the last video. I needed an idea that was quick to do because I haven't posted that much this year yet, so we're going to be making a chopping board. My chopping board in my kitchen is small and it's made of glass. I hate cutting on it, it feels horrible. And I've always really liked those end grain style ones, and I get to use up all my scrap wood. Win, 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 win. So let's get to it.
I do love putting old bits of my house in my projects. So first I'm going to prep these ancient pieces of wood that were part of my original basement door. Next we're going to set the thickness of this chopping board, and I want it chunky because I normally make mistakes.
I've messed it up already. I only have half an idea whenever I'm doing these projects, and I make it up as I go along. There isn't enough wood to be bigger than my existing chopping board, and that's the aim. So I'm going to go through my scrap wood and see what I can salvage. Okay, so I think we've got enough to make it a bit wider. I've still got these pieces at the side that I'm saving just in case I need them. But a lot of this stuff is actually smaller than my existing cuts, so I'm gonna have to cut all these again, which is actually a good thing because my miter saw is really cheap and horrible. It keeps giving these frayed edges, so I'm gonna do one of those zero clearance things. And that way all my blocks are gonna be nice and neat at the edges.
Because I was only trimming these pieces down, it was really awkward to hold them from the right hand side, so I switched to the other side to make things a bit safer. This was my first attempt at a zero clearance jig, and the back section moved, giving me some slightly frayed edges. Not as bad as usual, but it does mean I'm going to have to tidy everything up on the belt sander.
All the blocks are now the same size, they're all tidied up. I've got enough to make a nice chunky chopping board, so I've just got to put them together. Just glue them up and clamp them, is what I was thinking in my head. But I don't want a big chunk of blocks on this side and a small chunk of blocks on this side. That will be boring. First I've got to work out how to make an interesting pattern, then Tetris the pieces together and figure out how I'm sticking these things. You'll see in the video, I'm going to get to it.
Came up with these two sections which are looking pretty cool, but the pieces aren't the same size, so I'm going to have to clamp them in sections and trim them straight. I was struggling with ideas for the rest of the wood, so I decided to go for this straight line piece. But I was actually struggling to make it go straight. Once those two are dried, I repeated the process again to get two similar sections, and after that, I just went to work figuring out how to stick the other blocks together, which involved a lot of gluing and clamping.
I've used almost all the scrap wood sections that I cut, and we now have enough blocks to make a seriously chunky chopping board. If you've never watched the channel before, I'm not a proper woodworker, this is not a how-to video. I get things wrong quite a lot, and I'm absolutely terrible at gluing up large sections of wood. They always bow, they always go in different directions. You saw me struggling with the clamps in the video. So each one of these pieces is now going to have to go through the table saw to get it as straight as possible. Another thing I'm not that great at. I've got no idea what's going on. The first cut filled my basement with smoke. It's still quite smoky, even though I've been airing it out for an hour. It really struggled to go through the blade, and it hasn't really come out straight either. So I thought it might be easier if I lower the blade and cut a little bit at a time, but it still started firing out smoke, and I ended up with the worst cut I've ever done in my life. But I'm kind of stuck now because my entire plan was use the saw to get these things straight.
So I decided to give the belt sander a go. It's probably not the best way of doing this. In fact, it's probably one of the worst ways of doing it. But I didn't want to risk using the table saw and setting my house on fire. I really wanted to finish this video because more content means more views and more subscribers, and that makes me happy.
The sanding method turned out pretty well. It took a bit of trial and error, and I had to go quite slowly, but almost all the blocks are perfectly straight, apart from this one.
There was too much material to sand this one completely flat, so I decided to sand the inside, stick it to the outside of the board, and then I'll chop it off with a saw at the end.
Just found another little issue. I made this tiny end piece to make it a little bit longer because I wanted it big and chunky, but the edge it's sticking to isn't perfectly straight, so I'm going to try clamp it together and sand it flat. And because I want to glue this up all in one go, there's a few edge pieces that are just a little bit too long. I think I'm going to take them off with the drop saw, chop saw, chop chop, here we go! It's all stuck together. It's looking very cool. I've made another mistake. When I've clamped it up, it is bowed. I forgot to put some force on the top. It's bowed along this side and it's bowed along this side, so it's completely wonky. My belt sander's been doing so well, I'm going to use the belt sander to take the majority of it off before I put it on my router jig. Let's go.
My router kept on going slightly too deep, and then I realised my router jig is trash and it keeps flexing, so I had to switch back to the belt sander. I got a lot of tear out, which hopefully I can fix with sawdust and glue, and the edges were looking really rough, and I hope they sand out. Next, it was time for the juice groove. I didn't have the correct router bit for doing a curved handle properly, so I took the bearing off the top, did a small groove in the bottom for the end bit to drop in, and just had a go. I had loads of little gaps appearing in this thing, and I'd seen a trick on John Malecki's channel where he put glue in the gaps and then just sanded it and it fixed them, so I'm going to try that.
I'm going to try something different. Now that I've treated it, I'm going to cover it in food safe epoxy. Saw it on a video, don't know if it's going to work, so I'm just going to test it out. The scrapwood end grain chopping board is finished. It was a complete pain, but I absolutely love it. I think you'll find this with most scrapwood projects. You've got to make it up as you go along. There's a lot of gluing and clamping and waiting for things to dry. This one, with all the gluing and clamping, probably took me about 10 days in total. But because it's scrapwood, you're making it up as you go along, so you end up with something crazy at the end. This kind of looks professional, but at the same time, it's really random. You look through the board and... I was just about to say, you look through the board and you find different little bits every time you look at it, and I just found this one little section where the two pieces I've stuck together, the end grains line up perfectly. So they are a lot of effort to do, but I definitely think it's worth giving it a go. Now, I made a lot of mistakes and learnt a lot on this project. First of all, the handle. If I'm going to put a curved handle like this, I should get the correct router bit to actually do it without putting a massive groove at the very bottom. When I was routering it, I was probably putting a bit too much pressure on because it kept on leaving lines down the side, and they're still slightly visible on one side. I got a lot of tear out on the edges, and in some sections I didn't quite fix it properly. On the bottom section here, I routed too deep. I didn't mean to have this lip, but it looks kind of cool. I'm also glad I did it on the bottom, so it looks nice and round on the top. I should have paid more attention when I was gluing and filling the gaps on the top, because when I went to oil it, there was some PVA sections that stopped the oil getting into the board. And finally, the epoxy. Now, I think I'm onto something there, because there is certain sections that are just completely silky smooth, so I really need to give that another go. Now, I was actually building this for myself, and I have been using it a little bit, but I've decided I need a gigantic chopping board, so I'm probably going to list this on Etsy, and I won't put a stupid price on it this time. And that's your lot for this video. Thanks very much for watching. If you've got any tips, questions, or suggestions, say them in the comments below. I do try to answer every single one if I can do. If you do want to subscribe, that would be awesome. It is pretty fun when I see subscribe notifications coming through. Apart from that, see you in the next video.